Age of Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Fission radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and you gagers and grindies, to another edition of The Big Puzzle. I'm Barry Prince, coming to you live from my kitchen in northern British Columbia to the facilities of UCY Radio and TV. Thanks for joining and welcome to the show. Well, there's no shortage of things to talk about right now currently on our planet, but one of the things we're going to get into today, and I'm glad to be joined by a gentleman who I have a great deal of respect for what he's doing with his website and information he's sharing with the world. We're going to talk about climate and some of the things that are going on right now. I want to welcome to the show Jim Lee. I've had the pleasure of having Jim on. I think we've done 3 or 4, maybe even 5 shows in the past, and really look forward to our conversation. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Barry, and thank you for being a multi-year alumni of the Brain Food Organization, or a Brain Food University.
Yeah, I think I've got, 4 years in there now or something.
Yeah.
That qualifies me for a diploma, doesn't it?
It has to qualify for something. I mean, it has no monetary value whatsoever. But I've known you for a while, Barry. I like you, man. I think you're good people, and I'm always happy to help out a friend and in turn, bring this message out to the people. So appreciate you having me, man.
Yeah, you messaged me the other day, Jim, asking me for some airtime because you wanted to share some information that was really powerful. And we're going to get right into that, and then we can talk about a few other things today. I'd like to talk about some of the anomalies we're seeing with worldwide weather and some of your views on that. But why don't we get right into what we were having a little chat with prior to the show here?
Yeah, so, I mean, really, what's the million-dollar question? Asked by everybody from people who are concerned about chemtrails to geoengineering, weather modification, HAARP. The singular question everybody has, who is owning my weather? Is someone controlling my weather? And the problem is there's really no way to catch a person in the act, hold them accountable in a court of law. And this has been the overriding theme of my research for 7 years. So I came up with a solution several years ago called the Clarity Clause. And it's basically an add-on to a law that's already on the books. So in 1978, the United Nations signed the Environmental Modification Convention, or the Convention for the Prohibition of the Hostile Use of Environmental Technologies. Thank God they shortened that. But the short version is called ENMOD, E-N-M-O-D, E-N-M-O-D. So ENMOD was the Environmental Modification Convention. It was passed because reporter Jack Anderson saw a note on Lyndon Johnson's desk in the Oval Office that basically said something about continue operations in Laos, weather modification over Vietnam. The reporter, based on that note, did some digging and found out about Operation Popeye. And Operation Popeye was the U.S. Air Force using WC-130s strapped with JATO silver iodide flare racks designed by the U.S. Navy China Lake Naval Warfare Lab. And these silver iodide flares were used to make mud, not war. And everybody's seen the videotapes of, people in Vietnam up to their knees in mud. So they figured out that America was engaged in weather warfare in Vietnam. There were 3 congressional hearings held. Senator Claiborne Pell brought all this to light. So between Jack Anderson and Senator Claiborne Pell, we found out that the U.S. military lied under oath in front of Congress saying, no, we never modified the weather over Vietnam. But they did. And this is 4-star generals lying up in, Congress. So secret, yes. Has happened, yes. Documented, yes. Weather warfare is a thing. 2 of those hearings you can get on climateviewer.com. I did a presentation at G. Edward Griffin's Global Warming and Inconvenient Lie, which was Freedom Force International's Second Congress over in Arizona, and my paper was called Geoengineering, Weather Modification, and Weaponizing Nature. And this presentation is about the 100-year history of weather modification and how we need to do something about NMOD. Because NMOD, clearly bans weather warfare. You cannot detect it. It has happened before. 2 of the 3, the congressional hearings related to Operation Popeye and the weather warfare we did in Vietnam, 2 of those are linked in the details for the PowerPoint I did for my presentation. The 3rd hearing is still classified today. And that hearing was held in 1976. So for anybody who has any doubt that weather warfare is a thing, doubt no longer. So that's why I've been so passionately following this topic, because I see weather warfare as modern day nuclear weapons race. That the superpowers of the world are rabidly engaged in the study of and the weaponization of nature. And then Jack Anderson, years later after Popeye, 1981, I got a newspaper clipping from Dominic Marama, a friend of mine who works with me on weathermodificationhistory.com. And his newspaper he found basically stated that Russia and America were in a space race for directed energy weapons from space-based platforms. The underlying, not so much said part is there's also a weather race going on and a space weather race going on. So using ionospheric heaters, these types of technology are space weather modification, and they can have dire consequences for people worldwide, from mental health to cooking away all the bacteria on the planet when you open a hole up in the sky. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm right now doing a GoFundMe to get my butt up to the American Meteorological Society's 98th annual meeting in Austin, Texas, this January 9th through the 11th. It's a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And at that conference, I'm going to 3 days of presentations by geoengineering and weather modification scientists. This conference is called the 21st Conference on Planned and Inadvertent Weather Modification. They hold these conferences every 2 to 3 years. So they hold them at the AMS meeting, but not in the same building as the AMS meeting, because God forbid the public sees a big sign that says Weather Modification Conference. So instead of it being held in the Austin Convention Center, it's being held in the ritzy-ass Hilton across the street, where I will be attending. At the end of each presentation, I get a chance to ask questions directly to that geoengineer. So they're going to explain all the research. I'm going to listen to it, take notes, put my hand up in the air. My intention is to go to this conference and tell all of these geoengineering and weather modification and cloud seeding scientists enough is enough. There's been 100 years of weather modification without any transparency, and there is no way to detect rogue geoengineering, weather warfare, or any other type of atmospheric experimentation that ends in monetary, physical, or environmental losses. So my goal is a 2-part solution, which I call the Environmental Modification Accountability Act of 2018. And it's an add-on to NMOD that says hey, we know that weather warfare is illegal, but you must be able to catch somebody in the act. Therefore, everybody worldwide, if you intend to modify the weather, you must give 48-hour, 2 days, prior notice before you modify the weather. You got to go on a website, one registry, worldwide. Everybody can see it, same time. Hey, I'm modifying the weather over Los Angeles. I intend to dump 1,200 pounds of, this chemical, and my intention is to make rainfall. I will be doing it between these days and these days, and that is it. And then they have given public notice properly to everybody same time. Not just put it in the local newspaper so, people who really don't give a damn about weather modification can go, oh, well, they've been doing that forever. I'm talking about... Go ahead.
I got to put a little line on the bottom saying don't go outside during these periods of time because the chemicals we're using are dangerous to human health. They should put that in there too, shouldn't they?
Yeah. And, in the chat, Iota just asked, planned and inadvertent. Okay, that's a hell of a good question, brother man. What they mean, 21st conference on planned and inadvertent weather modification. Planned, cloud seeding projects. Ionospheric heaters, glaciogenic, ground-based cloud seeding generators operate all year long. Well, they operate typically from October to March of each year. They are all across the Rocky Mountains. I've mapped at least 45 to 60 of them on climateviewer.org. If you go to climateviewer.org, on the map, you click on weather modification, and there's all the cloud seeding generators I've found so far. So planned is that. There was an intention, we paid, we wanted to modify the weather. Inadvertent, according to these science guys, is mostly ship tracks and what everybody calls chemtrails. So ship tracks is called marine stratocumulus, is boats making clouds over the ocean. Contrail-induced cirrus is planes making contrails that turn into cirrus. Correct, Matt. Whoopsie. Whoopsie. Exactly. That's what it is. So, oh my God, we accidentally geoengineered the planet. So, by definition, by scientific agreement, chemtrails, what everybody calls chemtrails, which is cirrus clouds, because that's the $1 million semantic clue. Most people don't call them the right thing. When a contrail does not disappear, calling it a persistent contrail makes you a jackass. When a contrail turns into a cloud and covers the sun, it is now a cirrus cloud. And that's the big difference between the science community and the public community. In the science community, on the IPCC reports where they track how planes affect the climate, it has a little star. And it says, any linear contrails which have fanned out and become cirrus clouds are not attributable to aviation pollution. And that means once that linear contrail fans out, becomes a cirrus cloud, they can no longer tell the difference between God making that cloud and a plane making that cloud, at least from space with a satellite, because they don't have real-time video going all the damn time. So they call that inadvertent because it's accidental. So you take this another step. Chuck Long from NOAA's CIRES, CIRES, it's the Earth Systems Research Lab. Anyway, Chuck Long said jet aircraft are accidentally geoengineering the planet. This was covered in the Smithsonian and many other places. But what he said was planes are creating a background ice haze that is whitening the sky. Whoopsie! So this has nothing to do with even cirrus clouds. This has to do with if you walk outside and you look straight up and it's blue, and then you look at the horizon and it's white, that is the ice haze he's talking about. So these are called aerosols. And even though planes may not make clouds, they are always creating ice crystals. And these ice crystals are tiny. And they're so small that they're doing exactly what the geoengineers like Ken Caldera and David Keith are talking about. They're creating a white ice haze that is brightening the sky. And I've heard many people describe hey, if you just noticed, like in the most recent years, that the sky is just so damn bright. Like I cannot go outside without shades anymore. It wasn't always this bright, was it? I don't know. You tell me. But regardless, Chuck Long from NOAA, NASA, CRES, Earth System Research Lab at UCAR, he says it's accidental, air quotes, geoengineering. So that's inadvertent, according to the geoengineers. Here's the problem. If you make clouds that block the sun for 60 years, you say it's accidental, you call it pollution, and then you say, hey, wait a minute, these clouds are melting the poles. Oh, shit. We're going to have to pay carbon credits, carbon taxes. Oh, shit. They're on to us. Then Lee et al., 2009, for you science heads, he says, jet aircraft are creating contrail cirrus, which has a radiative forcing 5,000 times greater than all of the CO2 that ever came out of all of the planes that ever flew. So if the clouds they're making warms the planet more than all the CO2 than they ever made, then apparently chemtrails are a really serious problem. So then, if you decide that the chemtrails that you were making, the cirrus clouds you were making for 60 years, which you thought were cooling the planet, found out they were actually warming the planet, realized they were melting the poles, wrote 5 big scientific journal pieces like Cloud Blanket Melts Arctic Cap, Greenland's ice sheet melts faster when sky is blanketed in clouds. So now they know that cirrus clouds from jet aircraft are melting the poles. Here's the thing. For 100 years, they wanted to melt the poles to get to the oil. They have not stopped. In 1966, climate modification report by the National Research Council said stratospheric water vapor from jet aircraft will heat the planet by 1.7 degrees. Jules Verne said 1.5 degrees by firing a cannon to tilt the axis of the Earth would heat the planet by 1.5 degrees, melt the poles, we can get to the oil. Another chick said we could break up it near the Aleutians and shoot the warm waters of the Kurosha Current up to the poles and end the iceberg menace, air quotes, and that would melt the poles. So the Russian, there was a paper that said melt the Arctic, atomize the Arctic. That's the name of the title. Atomize the Arctic. Let's blow up nuclear bombs in the Arctic so that we can get to the oil. They did that. 2,053 nuclear explosions happened above ground. They are all mapped on Climate Viewer 3D, every single one of them. And you can go up to the top of Russia, and you can clearly see where Russia nuked the F out of the Arctic. And we did too. So everything they've talked about, Goradsky, a Russian scientist, said, let's put a potassium metal ring around the planet to melt the poles. 2 years later, U.S. military did Project Westford, the Westford Needles. We put 480 million dipole antennas in space, little metal poles. So for 100 years, they've been trying to melt the poles.
Well, those melting the poles is kind of insane.
Jim, they want to. It is a guarantee, dude.
Well, yeah, but I've read quite a few reports on the amount of methane that will be released if the poles melt, the amount of biodegradable material that's frozen right now that will turn into methane gas if exposed to the air. I mean, I'm sure you've looked at these same reports and the implications of that.
I would love to tell you about things. If you open that door, let's jump through it.
Huh?
So let's jump through it. I mean, you open the door and you got a homie on this station that talks about methane a lot, so why not?
Well, yeah, no, that's a real issue, and people aren't even aware of this. Jim, go ahead.
It's not an issue. It is a boogeyman, and I'm going to tell you why.
Okay, you tell me why.
All this stuff comes from a group called the Arctic Methane Emergency Group, AMEG, A-M-E-G. Go to it, ameg.me is their website. Sam Cran and Malcolm Light, two guys that are like head of the board at AMEG, they wrote a letter to world leaders in 2013 urging all governments of the world to geoengineer the Arctic. They said, stockpile titanium oxide for immediate spraying from aerial aircraft. Relax the use of bunker fuel in ships to create more ship tracks to cool the Pacific and hopefully slow down warming in the Arctic. Relax the ban on polar flights so that they can geoengineer the Arctic through that method. You still with me? I'm having internet connections now that I'm saying too much truth.
No, I'm listening, Jim. I've read reports from 3 or 4 different places on that, so I'm just listening to what you're saying right now.
That's AMEG. Now, here's the really freaky part about AMEG. AMEG is extremely important because they talk out of both sides of their face. I want you to Google this: Russia, America, and in quotations, new Cold War. What you're going to realize is right now, currently, America and Russia are in a war over Arctic drilling rights. Right now, particularly, Trump administration is trying to get out there right now to relax all the drilling rights up there. They've already fracked all the top of Alaska. AMEG says 2 things that are really scary to me. One is called Project Lucy, and I call it Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Malcolm Light, one of the members of AMEG, said, let's take methane that is shooting out. Before I tell you this, where does all this come from? It's something called the Clathrate gun hypothesis. This is the inside ball. If you want to get inside of Al Gore's twisted head, I want you to write this down. Clathrate gun hypothesis. And this is the scientific basis for all this bullshit that we're hearing today. A guy went up to the North Pole and dug a big ice column. He went back in time and said, here are the dinosaurs. Where the dinosaurs were, there was lots of CO2, followed by a massive amount of methane. Here's the theory, and you can't make this shit up, Barry. Dinosaur farts melted methane ice crystals, which vented and caused, air quotes, runaway global warming.
Okay.
This is where all of this theory comes from, the Clathrate gun hypothesis. And here's why it's bullshit. Do you know what caused the BP oil spill? Better known as the BP blowout? The blowout was caused by drilling into, wait for it, a methane hydrate. So all around the world, we have drilling rigs and fracking wells. And while the fossil fuel industry is just pleased as piss for people to talk about the Clathrate gun hypothesis and how the methane is going to come from the Arctic, it happens to accumulate there. But regardless, the methane is not coming from some global warming scenario where CO2 is going to cause all of the methane hydrates, these frozen methane balls underground, to suddenly vent. The USGS, U.S. Geological Society, wrote an article entitled "Why a Methane Doom Scenario is Highly Unlikely." It is on soundwave.usgs.gov. It ain't just me, bro, man, saying this. There are sane people still working for the government, apparently. Fugitive emissions worldwide are where the methane come from. When in the Oneida Basin, Los Angeles County, they tested a fracking well and found that up to 30% of its volume was released into the air. And that's methane. In New Mexico, there is a 2,500 kilometer square methane cloud that has been there for the last 3 years, and nobody can explain why. It's over a big-ass coal factory. Anyway, methane is coming from everywhere. There's the Darvasa door to hell. Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard of it, but I haven't.
Yeah, the one. All right. So it's a drilling rig accident. Fell into the gas mine, lit on fire. It's been burning for 40 years. Now I could do this for an hour straight, but the point is, when you got 1 million plus fracking wells, and they are constantly farting out anywhere between 10 to 30% of their volume, and you're talking 1 billion, gallons of compressed gas, and 30% of that maybe going into the air. To blame it on anything else is folly, but we'll go back. Let's get back to AMEG. So AMEG says this methane's a problem because of global warming, because of runaway global warming, because of Clathrate gun hypothesis. We're all going to die real soon. Every country in the world should geoengineer today. The UK government wrote them a letter back telling them piss off. Too soon. Anyway, that didn't stop them from coming up with this idea. If methane clouds erupt out of the Arctic, we will use HARP, or ionospheric heaters, turn to 13.65 megahertz, 3 of them, and cross the streams, point them at each other on these eruptions of methane, to turn methane in the air into diamond dust. And it's called Project Lucy. And the Project Lucy radio transmitters for atmospheric methane detection, destruction, and something else. So they want to use HARPs, ionospheric heaters, to find methane clouds, zap them, turn them into diamond dust, which will block out sunlight and cool the planet. That's geoengineering with a HARP, methane cloud, and diamond dust. Freaky. So that's Malcolm Light. He works for AMEG, a very prominent geoengineering looking website, talks about methane all day long, loves AMEG, preaches everything they say. Here's the effed up part, Barry. The same guys who promoted this Project Lucy, diamond dust, write a letter to world leaders to geoengineer the Arctic because all of the ice will be gone by 2015, which was a blatant effing lie, which we now see that they are cutting off all the cameras around the Arctic Circle so nobody can see how much ice is there right now because it's out freaking rageous. So they were completely wrong. They lied. They used a boogeyman to try to scare world leaders into geoengineering. Then they talked about using diamond dust with HARP and methane clouds. Then this is the most insulting part of all of it. The Angels proposal. Angels. Like angels don't play this harp. Angels proposal is Arctic natural gas extraction, liquefaction, and sales. And by liquefaction, they mean fracking. And by sales, they mean fracking the Arctic for money, just what they've been talking about doing for 100 years. The Arctic Methane Emergency Group, who is scared of runaway global warming, wants to frack the North Pole to get to the methane before it enters the atmosphere, before runaway global warming ever happens. So all of this is a damn boogeyman so that they can continue their quest for Arctic oil, period. And AMEG and the corporate lobbying around that is most sincerely funded by fossil fuel oligarchs who still just want to, it's called greenwashing. Greenwashing is where you pretend to be green, but your ass ain't green.
Wow, that's pretty deep. I mean, I get people like you on, and my knowledge of all this is very, very limited for the amount of research you do.
That is a very common perception, Barry. It's not uncommon.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying, most people don't ever look into things as deeply as you have or other people are, so it's kind of good to get you on here and throw some of these opinions out there. To me, the whole thing is just a sham. It really is. I mean, the whole agenda is just to control the population. But the thing about melting the caps, if they were intentionally melting the caps, the implications of that, Jim, are absolutely mind-boggling. To get that much fresh water entering the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans will virtually change the flow of the oceans. I mean,
they don't care
it right now.
They don't.
I know,
care.
but the implications to the human race are absolutely mind-boggling. So it really kind of blows my mind that these people would be possibly doing this intentionally. But nothing's out of the realm of possibility when dealing with maniacs.
Yeah. I am Lone Frog. I thought this said one frog. I am Lone Frog said, will synthetic weather be publicly traded? That's a great question. Part of the reason I'm going to this American Meteorological Society's weather modification conference is because it is publicly traded. I am doing a GoFundMe for that. Guys, please try to help me out. It's climateviewer.com. Link at the top of the page says, help Jim Lee, the Climate Viewer guy, go to the weather mod conference. If you guys could share that out, I'd appreciate it. But the CME Group, Chicago Mercantile Exchange, they trade weather derivatives, event contracts, and many other speculative weather commodities. There are companies like guaranteedweather.com. And these are weather insurance companies. And what weather insurance companies do is things like, you've got a $1 million corn crop, you insure it for $2 million, suddenly the weather insurance company goes, well, we don't want anything to destroy this crop. So we will take $100,000, we'll give it to a cloud seeding company, and they will do hail mitigation to make sure that the hail could fall on that corn crop is smaller, right? So if they can make the hail smaller, less corn will be damaged. They'll have to pay out less in crop damage insurance, and that's one example of how stocks, insurance, and money are involved in weather modification. Another example is there's a Oliver's Travels says we can guarantee you a cloud-free day on your wedding day for 100,000 euros. I mean, it's really gotten to the point now where, you know, when I first started doing this in 2011, I could barely find anything about this stuff on the internet, and I mapped everything I could find. To today, it seems like, you know, well, they're like, well, shit, the cat's out of the bag. We might as well tell them most of what we're doing. But we're still not there because there really is still no accountability. So that's kind of what I'm pushing for is this, you know, I used to call it the Clarity Clause. I'm now calling it the Environmental Modification Accountability Act of 2018 because I'm going to try to get this into law on the books. And hopefully, I've already had three geoengineers that have agreed with me on this. They said, yeah, it's a great idea. We should do this. We need this, actually. We'll never even be able to do what we want to do without this. I'm like, I know. So it's a necessity for public safety. I mean, you know, if nukes were invisible, they would be kind of similar to what's going on here.
Yeah, it's definitely. I read lots of reports on the biosphere of our planet right now, Jim. I've read a couple here in the last week that kind of really shocked me in the amount of heavy metals that are being detected in our soil and what it's doing to the actual stock or food production in the United States and the food belt. We're seeing a major drop in food production. This stuff's going on all over the place. And, you know, we talked before the show about solutions. And really, you know, we got to bring this information out, but we got to put the solutions out there. And this sounds like a real hardcore solution to one of the biggest problems we have right now is identifying these people and holding them accountable.
It really is, and it's an overriding theme. It's like, you know, what's really sad about it is, I've tried very desperately over the last 3 to 4 years to get other activists who are already talking about this to just understand the material and do something about it themselves because, you know, I have 2 daughters. Emma's 1 year old, Caroline's 8 years old. I have a wife, and we're taking care of her grandmother who has Alzheimer's. So, like, my plate's full, and I have a homestead. You know, I only get to do what I do about 2 to 3 hours a night. So, everything I've done, I'm doing it for free, and I'm doing it at night because that's about all I have time to do. So, this is really out of my comfort zone. You know what I mean? You know me, Barry. I like to just do my thing and stay the hell out of people's face. I don't want anybody looking at me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, we don't really have a choice at this point, do we, Jim?
You don't.
You know,
I mean, that's really it.
We see these things. If we see these things going on, and if we refuse to identify them, call them out, then we're being complacent. And we're just going along with the sheeple and allowing this stuff to go on. I mean, a lot of stuff you've talked about today, I'd have to research and look into it myself. The one thing about your site that I like is that you supply links on all information, and people can go to these links and vet the information that you're talking about themselves to see if there's credence and there's real truth to what we're talking about. And I urge people to go to Climate Viewer because I've gone and vetted some of the information that you have put out before, and I've looked at it, and it's credible. So that's really important that people realize that there's another source out there of information they can go to that I call credible. And get information that you won't find anywhere else. Period.
I appreciate that, dude. Like like the difference between, I mean, if you really want to get to it, the difference between me and everybody else is I will always give you the facts as honestly as I can up front and the references to where I got my beliefs from, and then I'll speculate afterwards. And I think that a lot of people just don't have any kind of, I mean, well, you don't have any responsibility. You're just a person on the internet most of the time, and you're not a journalist, but shit, I try to take this at least a little seriously. You know what I mean? Like, I have responsibility in the things I say because I don't want to ill-inform people. I actually want people to understand this so that we can do something about it. And if I get something wrong and I say that this is the truth, that can start a cascade of bullshit that could set us back for years. And for the last 3 to 4 years, honestly, I've spent way too much time trying to correct the actions of others instead of leading by example. Mm-hmm. So this is my way of saying, you know what? To the haters that stole my material and put it on your website, screw you. To the guys who want to say, you know, Jim Lee's a shill and try to get my attention, screw you. If you want to be part of the problem and say, don't help Jim go to the Weather Mod conference because X, Y, or Z, then you guys should have a big ass red flag. Because honestly, like, part of the reason I don't like doing GoFundMe's or even leaving my damn house is because A, I can't afford it, and B, I have to do the GoFundMe to get there, and C, every time I do, it's people in my community who are motivated by jealousy, see it as competition or whatever, go out and immediately start, you know, trying to throw poo on the situation. And I'm way past that. I'm not even going to drop your names because you're not even worth it. If you were, you'd have done something by now, so screw you. And that's why I'm going to this Weather Mod conference, because none of these people can be like me. That's just the truth. None of them are like me. I only was doing all this outreach to the other chemtrail websites because I figured if I could drag them kicking and screaming to the water, they could teach other people to fish, but they're not. So this is a necessity for me to bring my message to people who will hear it. Because the difference between chemtrail website owners, the public, and the scientists is, I explain this stuff, and even though scientists may be butthurt by it, I have yet to run into one that when I explain to them sincerely what I'm saying and why I'm saying it, none have disagreed. And that's not me just being manipulative. That's me explaining a problem, citing my evidence, and them going, shit, you're right. And I've recorded 3 so far. I intend to go to the Weather Modification Conference and talk to every meteorologist you've seen on TV, the head of the National Weather Service, anybody I can get to stand still and say, yes, I don't mind you recording me. I'm going to interview them, and I'm explaining my solution, these 2 parts, transparency and verification. Transparency, 48-hour prior notice. Verification, a citizen-powered sensor network which looks at your sky, broadcasts it on the internet, detects atmospheric aerosols, broadcasts it in real time on the internet. I created Climate Viewer 3D, climateviewer.org, for that purpose, to display the entire world's weather in one spot, and then collectively connect the dots so that we can figure out planes were here, ships were here, chemicals were released here, atmospheric effects occurred here. Most likely scenario is these 3 planes were ones involved. Who are they owned by? Bam. Listen, international court, we got a problem.
Jim, when is this conference again?
It's January 9th through the 11th. It's in Austin, Texas. It's at the Austin Convention Center, and it's the 98th American Meteorological Society's 98th annual meeting. They have an annual meeting every year, and this is, the Weather Service, American Meteorological Society. And in there, they're going to have many different conferences going on. An example is like the, blah, blah, blah conference on aerosol cloud interaction, or there's a class that I really wanted to take on the GOES-R satellite and streaming weather data. Unfortunately, it's like $220 a ticket to just the classes, and the ticket for me to get in's already like $640 for the conference. So I'd have to slap another $220 on top of that and another day onto my trip. But anyway, I would nerd the hell out up in the classes, on the weather data stuff from my Climate Viewer 3D. But the Weather Mod conference is being held there, and this is the 21st conference on planned and inadvertent weather modification. And I'll drop a link in chat so everybody can see this is a real thing and see who's going to be talking at the conference and what they're going to be talking about. But it's got, one second, let me bring this up. They got a couple days worth of the very first thing they're talking about, the Presidential Forum, Transforming Communication in Weather, Water, and Climate Enterprise, focusing on challenges facing our sciences. This opening statement by Richard B. Alley from Pennsylvania State University, I will bet my left testicle, is about dealing with conspiratards on the internet who talk about weather control. Because this is the first thing they're going to say, and it's about communications and weather.
Interesting. Jim, to me, having the opportunity, like having a gentleman like you join one of these conferences, I think anybody listening right now, on January the 11th is the last day. I got to get you back on the air as soon as you're finished this, so let's book an appointment. But I think, folks, anybody listening right now, an opportunity to get Jim into this conference and have him question these people and put this information in front of them. I think that's a huge opportunity for people that are listening to get involved with this. I know myself, Jim, you can put that on my Facebook, and I'll send you a little bit of money to get you there, buddy.
I appreciate it, man. Iota, I am not related to Bruce Lee, but inside my mind, I am. I will be like water when I go to the conference.
Well, yeah,
it's like a finger pointing
cool,
away
man.
to the moon. Yes. I'm a big Bruce Lee fan, and I've been a martial artist since I was 12 years old. Kimishin Ryu, Kung Fu, a couple other things. But yes, I love Bruce Lee. I heart Bruce Lee.
Well, he was a pretty fast gentleman in his time, I'll tell you. I've never seen anything like that. Nobody's ever seen anything like that.
I like his writings more than his fighting. I like his writings more than his fightings. You've got to read some Bruce Lee.
Yeah, I'll do
great
that.
Stuff. It's really great stuff.
Hey, Jim, what do you think? What do you think of these hurricanes that hit the States this year? Harvey in particular. I watched the patterns of that hurricane. It came in and went out, 2 or 3 times, and I've never in my life seen a hurricane act in that way. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a two-part thing. Part of it's natural science and progression, and part of it's probably some shenanigans. But here's how it works. Okay, so we have solar minimums and maximums. Are you familiar with these? Like how the sun puts out more energy and then it goes to sleep again. And this is usually on like a 13-year cycle. So 6 years hot, 6 years cold. And there's a trough and obviously a peak. So 2012, 2013 was the last peak. So we're going into the trough right now. And during troughs, basically, the solar minimum and maximum affects our force field. So the planet's force field is the ionosphere, is the Van Allen belt. During solar minimums, it's weakened because there's less energy raining into it. That's what creates the aurora borealis and all that stuff, yada, yada, yada. Since our force field is weakened during a solar minimum, more galactic cosmic rays can come in from space. And because more galactic cosmic rays come in, more clouds are formed. This is a little known fact. So and people will, I hear a lot of people, especially in the chemtrail world who are sky watchers, go, well, the clouds weren't this thick and now they're huge again, and it's got to be something related. Well, that's actually kind of natural, because during a solar minimum, cloud tops should increase dramatically. There should be increased rainfall. It should be cooler, yada, yada, yada. During a solar maximum, the force field is working strongly. People are losing their freaking minds. There's a scientist, he wrote a very prolific paper that I like to quote, Andrew Shezvesky, and it was on sunspots and mass excitability. And he refers to how solar maximums coincide with times of great revolution. Alternatively, solar minimums coincide with despots rising to power. And the reason why, people tend to be pretty pissed off, motivated, and want to change the world during solar maximums, and then their brains go back to sleep during solar minimums. The Illuminati, the Trilateral, Bilderberger, technocratic wizards, they know this. They know about the long-term progressions of things. It's in the stars and the astronomy. We know all about the electric universe. We just don't want to call it a thing, apparently, in books and teach it. So they know that during a solar minimum, there will be increased clouds. There will be increased hurricanes. Right now, it's a 13-year cycle. Last time was 2005. Remember what 2005 was?
Katrina.
Yeah, Katrina. So this kind of happens. It's to be expected a little bit, but the freaky part for me is this huge coincidence. And I'm gonna leave this. This is what so that's me giving the facts as best I can present them. There is no evidence, and nobody has presented any to me, because I sure as hell look for it, that any one of those 3 storms was modified. And I watched a lot of damn videos, and I've seen a lot of people point their pen at at a satellite, and they just don't know what the hell they're talking about. So that's unfortunate. And if you're not a weather guy, you can believe that. I understand. But there is no evidence that any of those 3 were modified. That's why I'm trying to build a sensor network. But here's the truth. And this is hell of a coincidence, and this is why conspiracies are real. In 2005, Katrina happened. In 2008, Obama was elected. Bill Gates and Ken Caldera wrote a patent for steering hurricanes. The Department of Homeland Security, 3 months later, had a meeting called the Hurricane Modification Workshop. It was in 2008 at Boulder, Colorado. Did I just get hung up on? No. You can't do this to me.
Hello. Hey, sorry, Jim. My internet went down there for about 30 seconds.
Yours wasn't the only one. And whenever you say Department of Homeland Security steering hurricanes, suddenly we both get kicked the hell off the internet. Like, edit that part. Roll that back, please. Please roll that back.
This is a child-friendly show now, Jim.
Okay. So basically, the Department of Homeland Security had a meeting in 2008 where they talked about steering hurricanes, and they invited all the geoengineers and cloud seeding scientists out there. Chief among them was Mosh Alamaro, who talked about using carbon black dust to steer hurricanes. John Latham and Stephen Salter talking about using their silver lining boats or the marine cloud brightening boats to steer hurricanes. But regardless, the Department of Homeland Security talked about steering hurricanes in 2008. And then we went on a 10-year hurricane drought, 4,323 days without a major hurricane making landfall. That's a huge coincidence, right? Obama comes into office, COP21 takes off, the climate scientists are all happy, they're talking about steering hurricanes, hell, Department of Homeland Security's in on it, cool, hurricanes all go away. It's just a coincidence. Maybe it's a solar maximum thing, like I said, but that's an extreme coincidence. Trump gets elected, throws out the TPP, destroys COP21, climate scientists mad as heck, and then suddenly 3 hurricanes start rolling in and destroy most of the South. Just a coincidence. I mean, there's a couple Republican voters down there, but just a coincidence, you know.
Well, everything that happens is just a coincidence, isn't it, Jim?
It just seems to me it's highly coincidental that Trump gets elected during a solar minimum. Here come the hurricanes. Climate scientists are all mad as heck, and climate scientists are geoengineers. You're not a geoengineer unless you're a climate scientist, unless you're just a jerk and you're shooting your mouth off. But regardless, that's a huge coincidence that he would poo on COP21 and then magically all the hurricanes would start rolling in. And But we had 4,323 days with no hurricanes. What happened? What changed? Is it just the weather just changed magically, or was it Trump that changed? Because the last time Katrina happened, what else happened? There was a George Bush in office, and he was blamed for the whole darn thing. And then here comes another Republican, and here come the hurricanes again. I'm just saying, man.
Okay, well, that's definitely some thoughts to ponder there, Jim.
It certainly is.
I wasn't quite aware of those coincidences. What those 4,000 days? What years were those?
They basically date it from Katrina, and I don't know why, because didn't Sandy make landfall? I mean, it wasn't a major.
I thought Sandy hit 3 years after Katrina, did it not?
Hold on, I'll just type it.
I don't have the information in front of me.
4,323 days hurricane. All right, here it is. So this is on CNS News. U.S. major hurricane drought ends at record 4,323 days by Susan Jones, posted August 26, 2017. Hurricane Harvey roared, blah, 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 and that's when it ended.
I think we'll have to fact check that one, because
there are
Sandy came in after Katrina.
Well, it says right here, Wilma struck October 24, 2005. 4,323 days ago. So the last one they account is Wilma in Florida on October 24th of 2005. And I would argue with that too, but that's just the number they floated around. And this is posted on like 25, 30 different websites. It all came out same time. Harvey hit, and they were all going, look, the 10-year hurricane drought just ended. So if they're saying it, it's got some political. All I'm saying, I'm not saying there's any facts to it at all. I'm saying that if you hear somebody making claims like that, it is propaganda for a reason. And what is that reason? Trump made all the hurricanes come back. Are you serious? Are you serious Trump? On 30 damn websites that Trump made the hurricanes come back, basically.
Okay, well, obviously anybody that really looked at that and thought about it for a second would blow that off in a minute, because I can go to a site right now and look at the list of hurricanes that have happened in the United States in the last 14 years since Katrina, the last 12 years since Katrina, and there's been quite a few majors. So to me, like, that would be definitely propaganda, but the fact that somebody would pay attention to that without fact-checking it themselves, Jim, kind of is disturbing, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it's over. Here's another one. 4,324 days by What's Up With That, and that's a hell of a blog, man. He's a really good writer. Hurricane drought to end. Here's another one. Climate Depot, 4,324 day major hurricane drought ends. Weather.com. Florida's record-setting hurricane drought will end. Weather.com. It's all over, everywhere. So I'm just saying, like, for them to all simultaneously come out and say, well, there it goes. Harvey ruined it for everybody. Our hurricane drought has ended. And the last time we had a big one that they pointed out was Bush. So is it that we actually had a drought and Department of Homeland Security was pushing all the hurricanes back out into the ocean? Or is it simply that the liberal media didn't want to point out Sandy because then it would be Obama's fault somehow? I mean, is that what happened? Are they saying that there was a 10-year drought of hurricanes because they don't want to blame Obama for anything while he was in office, but the minute Trump comes in, the hurricanes are his fault, Bush's fault for Katrina? Come on, you get where I'm going with this? Is this even a real thing, or is this all weather propaganda? Because they're saying it's climate change. Climate change caused the hurricanes this year. Don't you know?
Well, what's going to be the story next year, Jim?
It's going to get ugly, because by 2025, we're going to be in a grand solar minimum. And it's going to make the weather today look tame. As a friend of mine, David Devine from Adapt 2030 said, by 2025, you're going to understand why the ancients lived in stone houses.
Yeah, the reports I read tell me that we're going to go into an ice age, Jim. Yep. Am I correct in saying that?
That's where it looks like we are headed, and that's why this global warming alarmism is at a fevered pitch, because their time is running out, and the ice has already rebounded. They know that they can't keep this lie up, And, that's just the way things roll. Like time will show that they were all liars and people will forget because their memories are short.
Interesting. We'll see where it goes in the next little while here, Jim, because what's gone on in Canada with our government and this carbon tax that they've implemented in our society, that whole house of cards is going to fall apart in the very, very near future on Justin
Oh,
Trudeau.
don't say house of cards around me. I've still got Kevin Spacey's face and like burned in my retinas and all the other pedos that are burning right now. Woo! But yeah,
exactly. Hey, listen, we're down to 5 minutes or about 4 minutes left in the show here, Jim. I want you to plug your site and tell people a little bit about the information available there, and I'll give you a minute for your last thoughts and some of the solutions you see, and we'll close up the show. It's been a great show, man. Thanks for coming in today.
I appreciate you having me, man. And again, I'm Jim Lee from Sumter, South Carolina, 41 years old, and I do everything I do on my websites for free. There's no ads on climateviewer.com, climateviewer.org, or weathermodificationhistory.com. ClimateViewer.com is my blog. That's where I write all my research. It's extremely long, has more links than you can shake a stick at, and has been feared by trolls and scientists alike since 2011. ClimateViewer.org is my 3D globe. I wrote all of my own programming, graphics, and research. The 3D globe is a cesium.js open source map, which has every nuclear reactor on the planet, every missile defense radar on the planet that I could find, every HARP installation like ionospheric heaters like Sura, Jicamarca, Peru, Arecibo, laser beams, and you can track weather, real-time satellites, real-time NEXRAD, wind, earthquakes, fire, volcanoes, oh my, all on Climate Viewer 3D. And then weathermodificationhistory.com, where I have a lengthy timeline, the world's most extensive collection of weather modification-related information, patents, programs, laws. You cannot get better information than is at Weather Modification History. And, of course, I'm doing all of this, free of charge. And all I'm asking right now is if you guys could support my trip to the AMS. I'm going to take my 7 years' worth of information I packed in this head, which I have memorized very well, and I'm going to go and talk to these scientists like a gentleman and say, enough with this. We have a solution that we would like to propose. There's a law already on the books. We want to make that law work for everybody, both sides. And that's my solution. It was called the Clarity Clause. It's now called the Environmental Modification Accountability Act of 2018, and I hope to take that to the Weather Modification Conference. If you guys could support my work on it, there's a link to GoFundMe at the top of climateviewer.com. It says, help Jim Lee, the Climate Viewer guy, go to the Weather Mod Conference. If you could click that, share that, I would greatly appreciate it. Leave me comments on the website. I always read them. I read and respond to every comment on climateviewer.com. I may not respond to all of my social media because, good Lord, it is overwhelming. And like I said, I only have 2 to 3 hours a day to do what I'm trying to do, and it's getting more and more monumentally busy. So,
I'll tell you, Jim, I hope I win a big lottery here in the next couple of weeks. I'll send down some money so you don't have to worry about the dollars, because what you're doing is I think, paramount and very important for people to be able to go to this site and get all this information in one site. I mean, I've looked at it, and some of the things you covered just blow my mind. So kudos to you, and great having you in. And I want to get you in. I'm going to help you get some money raised here for this, because I think it's a very, very worthy cause, folks. I really do. I said earlier in the show, to have somebody be able to get inside and actually talk to these people and put these thoughts across to them, whether it gains momentum or not, that remains to be seen. But I think it's a great opportunity for us to support Jim right now and at least get him to this conference and let him have his say said. Anyways, great having you in, Jim, again. Thanks for joining me, guys. We're almost out of time. It's been a great show, and I love having guys like Jim in, because whether you agree with him or not, he's put some very thought-provoking thoughts in your head today, and I urge you to go look at the information yourself and vet what he's talked about, and we'll take it from there. I'll be back next Friday, same time, same place. Thanks for joining. Have a great week. Love you all. God bless you.